what on earth had happened at my property. I invited him in, offered a bottle of water, and walked him straight to the surveillance monitor I kept in my home office. Jim was a no-nonsense guy who respected evidence more than emotion, and as soon as he saw the footage of Karen welcoming people through the side gate like she owned the place, his jaw clenched. I showed him the flyer one of the guests had dropped. His eyes narrowed at the title. Karen's Summer Splash, suggested donation $25. Jim let out a low whistle and said she was going to regret this one. I then pulled up a few screenshots from Facebook that one of the guests had posted publicly. They were promotional posts advertising the event using my home address and photos taken from a previous HOA newsletter that had shown my backyard during an article about landscaping. Karen had repurposed the photos to make her event look official. She had even tagged the HOA in one of the posts to make it seem like it was sanctioned. Jim rubbed his temples like he was already getting a headache. While we were still talking, a notification buzzed on my phone. Someone had sent me a private message with a video link. I opened it and saw a shaky recording of Karen earlier that day, standing by the pool and announcing to the guests that they could leave their donations by the cooler or send them via a mobile payment app. She laughed and joked about how this was a more civilized way to enjoy summer. That video had now been reposted to a local neighborhood gossip page and was racking up comments by the minute. Jim leaned in, watched the clip, and then quietly said that Karen was going to face a board review for this. Outside, Karen had not yet left the neighborhood. She had been sitting in her car parked 2 houses down, still making calls, still trying to salvage whatever story she had crafted in her head. At one point she marched down the sidewalk and banged on the gate again, yelling that I had destroyed her reputation and that she would see me in court. Jim walked out with me, stood at the end of my driveway, and told her flatly that she needed to go home and wait to be contacted by the board. She started to argue, but something in Jim's tone made her pause. She turned and stormed off, her flip-flops smacking the pavement like angry clap. Later that evening, an emergency HOA meeting was scheduled. It was held online over video call, but it was clear from the start that no one had Karen's back. One board member began by reading aloud a list of HOA bylaws that she had violated. Unauthorized use of private property, misrepresentation of HOA sponsorship, and the hosting of a commercial event within neighborhood limits without approval. Another member confirmed she had received screenshots from multiple residents showing that Karen had advertised the event as an HOA-endorsed function. Karen, who had joined the call from her kitchen, tried to play the victim. She claimed it was a misunderstanding, that she thought the property was part of the shared recreational space. Jim interrupted her and said that her own flyer listed my home address, not the HOA clubhouse, and that she knew full well this was my private home because she had filed noise complaints against it in the past. What made it worse for her was that several of the party guests had already begun demanding refunds. A handful had reached out to the HOA directly, asking if the event had been official, and some were threatening to go public with their complaints. One man emailed the board with a screenshot of the payment he had sent to Karen's account. His message ended with a line that said if he didn't get a refund within 72 hours, he was going to small claims court. Karen's face on the video call shifted from defiant to desperate. She begged the board not to remove her from her volunteer committee position. She said she had worked hard for the community and just wanted to bring people together. No one responded. The silence was louder than any argument. The board voted unanimously to place Karen on probation and suspend her from all HOA events pending further review. She would not be allowed to host or attend any gatherings at community locations. A fine was also discussed, and the legal committee was tasked with determining if any civil penalties could be applied due to the unauthorized nature of her event and the potential liability risks involved. Karen left the call before the meeting ended, slamming her laptop shut while someone was still talking. The sound echoed through the video feed and then went quiet. That night, my phone buzzed again. This time it was from one of the neighbors who had seen the video online. He sent a meme that someone had already made using a screenshot of Karen screaming by the gate. The caption read, "Not your pool, not your rules." I couldn't help but laugh. It had taken only hours for Karen's grand plan to collapse into a public disaster. The woman who once tried to dictate everyone's lawn height was now the face of pool party trespassing gone wrong. Still, the damage was done. My pool needed to be cleaned, furniture scrubbed, and several things replaced. But I wasn't rushing. I had something else in mind. A message. A reminder that private property was not a suggestion. I started sketching ideas for a new security gate, something that couldn't be opened even if someone tried to scale the fence. And I had already ordered a sign. One that would be drilled directly into the gatepost in bold black letters. No trespassing. Offenders will be locked in. The next morning, I stepped into my backyard with a cup of coffee and a bucket of resolve. The air still smelled faintly of chlorine and regret. My loungers were stained with spilled soda, the pool's surface littered with deflated floats and half-eaten snacks, and one of the garden lights had been bent sideways. It was like a tornado had hit my peaceful retreat, except this tornado wore cheap sunglasses and called herself Karen. I set the coffee on the porch railing and began dragging wet towels and trash bags toward the curb, one piece at a time. There was no point in getting angry again. I'd already won round one. Now it was time to finish what she started. As I worked, a few neighbors walked by. Some offered shy waves, others chuckled softly, and one elderly woman gave me a slow, satisfied thumbs up without saying a word. It was obvious the story had spread. Everyone had seen the video clips, the memes, and the screenshots of Karen's now-deleted event page. My phone had been buzzing non-stop. Even someone from a local HOA accountability group had reached out asking for permission to share the footage as an example of neighborhood overreach. I hadn't responded yet, but the idea of Karen's tantrum becoming a training video for HOA abuse prevention made me smile. I hauled the last garbage bag to the driveway and turned to find a package on my porch. It was the new security sign I had ordered. The letters were bold and unmistakable. Private property. No entry. Offenders will be locked in and prosecuted. I held it up against the new metal gate that had been installed overnight by a local contractor I trusted. This wasn't just about keeping people out. It was about making a statement. This was my land, my pool, my rules, and anyone who thought otherwise could enjoy the view from behind bars. I bolted the sign into place and stepped back to admire the simple elegance of deterrence. Karen, of course, was not done. Around noon, I saw her through the window marching down the sidewalk with a large envelope clutched in her hand. Her face was red, not with embarrassment, but determination. She stopped at the end of my driveway and began waving it around like a protest banner. I stayed inside and watched. Eventually, she placed the envelope on my mailbox and walked away, muttering something to herself. I waited until she was out of sight before retrieving it. Inside was a letter printed on cheap paper with a dramatic heading. Notice of property use dispute. According to her, my property was subject to something she called shared recreational zoning due to an old, now-defunct clause in the community charter. She included 2 blurry photocopies of what looked like a 2005 newsletter and a map with a circle drawn in red ink that didn't even touch my property lines. It was nonsense. Desperate, shaky nonsense. I took a picture of the letter and forwarded it to Jim and the HOA board, along with a note that said Karen had officially entered the fantasy realm. Less than an hour later, Jim called me directly. He was laughing so hard I could barely understand him. He told me not to worry, that the documents were outdated and irrelevant, and that Karen was grasping at anything she could find to justify her behavior. She had apparently been calling other board members all morning trying to get them to issue me a warning for locking the gate, and every single one had told her the same thing. I had the right to protect my property. She had broken the rules. End of story. But Karen wasn't one to go down without a show. That evening, she took it one step further. I was on my back porch grilling a few burgers when I heard the sound of something being wheeled down the road. I looked up to see her dragging a folding table and a rolling speaker toward the front of my property. She was followed by 2 folding chairs, a stack of printed flyers, and her sister Linda, who looked like she'd rather be anywhere else. They set up shop near my driveway, just outside the property line. Karen placed a large poster board on the table that read in huge red letters, "Pool sharing is a right." She turned on the speaker, which started playing some sort of marching tune, and began handing out flyers to anyone walking by. I stood in silence, flipping my burgers as the absurdity unfolded. Karen, now fully entrenched in her own delusion, was staging what she called a community awareness demonstration. She shouted over the music about inclusion, summer access, and how the neighborhood deserved to enjoy the luxury of shared spaces. A few neighbors stopped, but none joined. One teenage boy took a flyer, read it, laughed, and walked away shaking his head. Linda sat in her chair fanning herself, clearly mortified. After about 20 minutes, Karen noticed I was watching from the porch and raised her voice even more. She said I was selfish, that I didn't care about the children, that I was creating division. I just turned back to my grill and poured another glass of iced tea. It didn't take long before the show fell apart. A gust of wind knocked over the poster board. The speaker started glitching and looping the same 2 seconds of marching music. Linda stood up, said something under her breath, and walked away without looking back. Karen scrambled to keep things together, trying to tape the sign back to the table, but it flopped sideways every time she moved. The few people still watching began to drift away. She eventually gave up, packed everything up with angry, jerky motions, and dragged the whole sad setup back toward her house. I watched her go, half expecting her to turn around and yell something dramatic, but she just kept moving, humiliated and sweaty under the setting sun. The following morning, the final blow landed. A clip from the protest had been picked up by a local satire page and turned into a viral video. It showed Karen shouting into the wind with the sign falling over and the audio glitching, while someone added cartoon sound effects and zoomed-in captions like "Justice for pool people" and "Let my swimmers go." The video was everywhere by lunchtime. Karen was now internet famous for all the wrong reasons. The HOA received emails from people as far as the next county asking if the pool protest lady was real. Jim sent me a message that just said she's done. I replied with a thumbs up and a photo of my new sign. I spent the rest of the day power washing the patio, replacing the broken garden light, and adding an extra lock to the pool gate. As the sun dipped low and the sky turned golden, I finally sat down in a dry lounger with a cold drink and watched the steam rise from the warm pavement. No noise. No strangers. No Karens. Just peace. For the first time in days, my backyard felt like mine again. 3 days passed without a single knock at my door, a single flyer on my mailbox, or a single shriek from across the fence. It was quiet, almost suspiciously so. The pool glistened under the afternoon sun, finally clear again after 2 rounds of deep cleaning and a full filter replacement. I had repaired the snapped skimmer handle, re-stained the deck chairs, and even added a few solar-powered lights along the pathway. Everything was slowly returning to normal. But even with the calm, I knew the storm hadn't truly passed. Karen was too proud, too entitled, and too loud to let it all fade away without one final act of self-destruction. And right on cue it came. It started with a whisper. One of the HOA committee members, a mild-mannered guy named Frank who mostly handled landscaping schedules and barely said more than a sentence in meetings, emailed me a tip. Apparently, Karen had scheduled an emergency HOA complaint review against me. She claimed I had threatened the safety of community members by locking the gate during the pool incident. She wanted me cited for reckless endangerment, intimidation, and for creating what she called a hostile environment. Frank's tone in the message was apologetic, like he didn't even want to be the one to deliver the news. But I wasn't surprised. Karen had backed herself into a corner and now she was looking for a way out by flipping the narrative. The review was scheduled for Friday evening at the HOA clubhouse.